Picture the Susquehanna River on a winter morning. The water is gray and slow, the shoreline trees bare. Then something moves. A massive dark shape drops from the canopy, hits the surface, and rises with a fish locked in its talons. A bald eagle. The chances of seeing one in Pennsylvania today are greater than they have been in 100 years. That is not an accident. It is the result of one of the most determined conservation campaigns this country has ever mounted. But here is the part almost nobody is talking about. The eagles came back, and then something strange followed them home. From the 50s through the 70s, bald eagle populations plummeted because of DDT. The pesticide caused eggshell thinning. Eggs cracked under the parent's weight or failed to allow proper gas exchange, driving rapid declines in eagles, ospreys, and peregrine falcons. By the early 80s, Pennsylvania was home to just 2 or 3 nesting pairs. 2 or 3 in the entire state. The national symbol was disappearing from one of the most historically significant states in the Union. The Pennsylvania Game Commission knew they had to do something drastic. With federal and private funding, an eagle recovery team flew 1,700 miles northwest to La Ronge, Saskatchewan, home to roughly 1,500 stable breeding pairs, to capture young eagles and bring them back. The bet was simple. Bald eagles returned to the region where they fledged. Get Canadian-born birds to fledge on Pennsylvania soil, and the birds themselves would do the rest. Over 7 years, 88 eagles were released at 2 sites, Haldeman Island in Dauphin County and Shohola Lake in Pike County. At each site, a hack tower with nest boxes and perching branches awaited the young birds. Once transferred, they had no human contact. They were fed, watched from a distance, and left to find their wings on their own terms. And it worked. By 2006, Pennsylvania counted over 100 active nests, the first time that threshold had been crossed since DDT decimated the population decades earlier. By 2014, bald eagles were removed from the state's threatened and endangered species list, with over 300 nests recorded that year. The population eventually grew so robust that exact numbers were no longer tracked. Pennsylvania had gone from 2 or 3 breeding pairs to over 500 nests, one of the great wildlife conservation stories in the history of the state and the nation. So, the story ends there, right? The eagle is back. The pesticide is banned. The protections are in place. The nests are full. Celebrate and move on. Except the wildlife rehabilitators noticed something. Eagles were coming in sick. Not a few, a steady, persistent, troubling stream. And when veterinarians ran the blood work, the answer kept coming back the same: lead. Of all bald eagles tested by Pennsylvania rehabilitation centers between 2006 and 2016, 1/3 had measurable levels of lead in their systems. 1/3 in a bird that had been saved at enormous expense precisely from a poisoning crisis. In 1 year alone, 12 bald eagles were treated with confirmed lead poisoning. Only 1 survived. Here is the question I want you to sit with. The DDT ban in 1972 is widely credited as the turning point for bald eagle recovery. Lead had always been in the environment, in paint, in pipes, in fishing sinkers, in ammunition. So why, after the eagles came back stronger than ever, were they being poisoned by lead at a rate researchers called alarming? Was this always happening and nobody was watching closely enough? Or had the recovery itself changed something? Would you switch to copper ammunition if you knew it could save a bald eagle from a death like this? Comment your answer below, because the debate between hunters, conservationists, and researchers is one of the most fascinating and unresolved arguments in wildlife science right now. The leading theory, supported by the most data, goes like this. When a hunter shoots a deer with a lead bullet and leaves the gut pile behind, that pile carries bright white fragments of lead scattered throughout. Eagles and other scavengers eat those fragments. Raptors are more affected by lead than other scavengers. The heavy metal metabolizes quickly into their bloodstream and organs, wreaking havoc on their nervous, digestive, and musculoskeletal systems and impairing brain, kidney, and liver function. A fragment as small as a grain of rice can kill an eagle. The majority of lead poisonings prove fatal. The timing is not random. Lead exposure in bald eagles spikes during and after hunting seasons. Research across the United States found that 46% of bald eagles had blood lead concentrations above dangerous thresholds, with the highest prevalence in fall and winter. Rehabilitation centers regularly receive birds in winter that are grounded and debilitated, unable to stand, appearing drunk, showing balance and coordination problems, wing droop, leg paralysis, muscle wasting, and anemia. The survival rate for eagles treated with elevated lead levels at one major wildlife center was just 5%. So why didn't this show up when eagles were already endangered in the 70s and 80s? The answer may be deceptively simple. When there were only 2 or 3 nesting pairs in Pennsylvania, there were almost no eagles out there to be poisoned. The lead was always in the gut piles. The deer were always being shot. But there were not enough eagles scavenging to make the poisoning rate visible. As the population recovered and expanded into new territory, sometimes into urban areas, more and more eagles moved into landscapes thick with hunting activity. The recovery had, in a very real sense, walked the eagles directly into a hazard that had been invisible when they were nearly gone. A first-of-its-kind 8-year study found widespread lead poisoning in North American bald and golden eagles and concluded it is slowing bald eagle population growth by 3.8% annually. 3.8% every single year, silently erased from a recovery that generations of conservationists worked to build. Even though the population seems like it's recovered, one researcher warned, some perturbation could come along that could cause eagles to decline again. Not everyone agrees on what to do about it. Persuading hunters to switch from lead ammunition poses real challenges, cost, availability of alternatives, and misconceptions about accuracy. A national ban on lead shot for waterfowl hunting has been in effect since 1991, but broader ammunition bans have remained stalled due to politicization. Meanwhile, the Pennsylvania Game Commission now actively promotes non-lead ammunition and tackle and asks hunters to bury gut piles to reduce scavenger exposure. The technology exists. Copper, steel, bismuth, and tungsten alternatives perform well. The path forward is clearer than it has ever been, but since the waterfowl ban, there has been no measurable change in eagle mortality from lead toxicity. The needle has not moved. The research keeps finding new layers. Lead accumulates in bone, so older eagles carry higher concentrations, the record of every contaminated meal, compounding year after year, even when the bird seems healthy. Researchers detected chronic lead poisoning in 46 to 47% of eagles measured in bone, and acute poisoning in 27 to 33% measured in liver, blood, and feathers. And the patterns do not map cleanly onto hunting density or population size. Eagles in some regions are being poisoned far more than others, and researchers are not entirely sure why. Something else is going on, and the tools to measure it precisely are still being developed. One of the eagles that died from lead poisoning was a 30-year-old bird. one of the original 88 brought from Saskatchewan to launch Pennsylvania's restoration effort. A bird that had lived through the entire arc of the recovery, that had helped build the population now stretching across the state, dead from the same category of human-caused contamination the whole program was designed to escape. That is the strange, heavy irony at the center of this story. Pennsylvania did the hard thing. It rescued a species from the edge. It flew to Canada, built the hack towers, funded the science, banned the pesticide, passed the protections, and the eagles came back, which meant there were now enough of them to reveal a problem that near extinction had kept hidden. The recovery turned the light on in the room, and what the light showed was another crisis waiting in the shadows. The mystery is not solved. Researchers are still tracking blood levels, mapping scavenging routes, modeling what 3.8% annual drag on population growth means over the next 20 years if nothing changes. And in rehabilitation centers across Pennsylvania, the birds are still arriving, grounded, unable to fly, carrying in their bones the record of every contaminated meal. Whether that record ends differently than it did for the original generation of eagles is still an open question, and the answer depends on choices being made right now in the field by people who may not yet know what is at stake. If you want to understand more about the science of wildlife recovery and the hidden threats that follow conservation success, subscribe and hit the bell, because there are more stories like this one, and most of them do not have clean endings yet.